Welcome to Specific Love. Today I'm going to show you how I built this awesome 2-chambered bathouse with only 4 fence posts. Let's begin. Now for this project I'm going to be using cedar fence posts. These come in a 1x6x6 format, and also it's nice and rough just from the factory, which would be a good starting point for this bathouse. Let's do this. Now the top of the cedar fence post already has a corner cut off. I'm actually going to incorporate this in the design, so we're going to cut these down on a miter saw. Now I cut the 3 of the boards down into a 26-inch section and additionally some 22-inch sections. This is going to be the back, this is going to be the middle section, and it's going to sit right in here. Now I'm actually going to be cutting some to go on the front, but I'm going to cut them at a horizontal feature, so let's get that going. Now if you can look closely at these boards, you'll notice that the widths are just a little bit different. So we're going to take these on a table saw and we're going to try and trim these down to the smallest board, which happens to be this middle one, so that they all can be the same width, plus they can all have nice smooth sides so I can glue them together. Now that I have these trimmed and smooth on all the sides, I'm going to put them on my clamps here, throw some glue in between them and clamp them together. I'm actually going to do the middle and the back at the same time to try and cut down on some time. Now I'm going to be using type 3 glue because it is waterproof and meant to be outdoors. Now while that wood's drying, I'm going to take some of the leftover wood and actually have an old batarang that I made a long time ago in a video. And I'm going to trace it out on some of the cedar, and then it'll be a nice little accent to put inside the box. Now while tracing this, I want to make sure to avoid any of these knots, otherwise it could easily crack and cause this to break apart later. Now it helps to get these to stay to the front of the box. I'm going to smooth these out just a little bit on the back sides only, just so it's easier to glue. Now I did decide to go over the front of these with the sander just to make it a little bit easier, because I want to add some stain, a little dark walnut. Hopefully this will be dark enough so it'll stand out a little bit more on the house. Now after the glue is dried, I'm going to go over all these edges just real gently with a chisel, trying to remove any of this glue squeeze out so it's not a problem later. Now before I went any further, I lined everything up and I discovered that these front pieces are just a little bit too wide, so I need to cut these down on the table saw, and then hopefully we can get everything working together. Now if you look here, you'll notice as we go along the edge that none of these are truly lined up. But just remember, neither is a tree or a standard cave that the bats might be in. So a little bit of waviness, that's alright. Now if we look at the total size here between these 3 boards, it's almost 2 inches. We want roughly 3/4 of an inch between these 2 sections here. So total, this should be about 3.5 inches thick. And to do that, I'm going to cut some 3/4 inch strips off of one of these leftovers. Now here's roughly what the sides will look like once the strips are in place. But first I do need to trim the top, but I want to trim everything at a slight angle, maybe 5 or 10 degrees, so that this final piece will actually be the roof, and because it'll be at an angle, the water will more likely flow off than just sit and rest on top. Now that I have all this angled, I'm going to be cutting the roof so that it'll stick out just a little bit past on each side, maybe about 1 inch, a little overhang on the sides and on the front, but it's going to be flush on the back. And to do that, I need to first cut this angle here to match this, so that way as it sits back on top, this will be flush with the back side. Now that I have everything cut to size, I've lifted up each side with a couple 2x4s so I can have plenty of room to clamp it together once I have the glue on. I also had some extra cut-offs when I was trimming the side pieces, and I'm going to put 2 in between each chamber so that if by chance the wood starts to warp, it's less likely to get out of shape. Now, even though I just put some glue on this, I almost forgot a step, and this is extremely important. You need to put some grooves in all your boards. And a lot of people, they'll tell you it with a table saw and other things, you don't need them that deep. In fact, just take a little hand saw, and all you need to do is etch across. They need to be about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. They don't have to be super deep. If you can reach your nail in there and you can grab your nail on these little pieces, then they're deep enough. Just remember, the bats have real sharp claws. They don't need super deep. So just go across it and quickly create all these etches on all the interior sides. And just remember when you're doing these don't have to be perfectly straight, because if you look at a tree or you look in a cave, you're never going to find perfectly straight little pieces for the bats to grab. So they'll be fine as long as you can get them relatively straight. And for that matter, if you don't like doing it exactly straight, you can do them at angles. Just as long as you don't do them up and down. Anything like this, any kind of angles, any kind of straight lines, it can be plenty enough grip for those bats to grab onto. Now, if you notice here, I purposely left a little bit of a gap right between the bottom 2 pieces. And the reason why, in the summertime, these bat houses can get a little bit warm, especially in direct sunlight. So if by chance the bats are way up here and they get a little too hot, they can move themselves down near the air vent, still within full protection of the box, and cool themselves off. And it's also a good idea when you're clamping the boxes down to use some sacrificial board, particularly on the front, so you don't deform it and create a bunch of odd shapes from your clamps. And also remember that cedar is real soft, so you don't have to clamp it really hard. I also had to put a bunch of scratches in these lower pieces. Yes, it takes away from the beauty of them and just the look of the wood, but this is the actual landing pad that the bats land on to get up into the box. So there needs to be just as much grip here as there is inside. Now I'll flip this up on its side because I want to put a couple extra screws, in fact 4 extra screws, 2 in each corner, only on the back. That's because it took a little bit longer than planned when I was gluing this up, and I just want to make sure that it is fully held, specifically on the back, since it's going to be taking most of the weight when it's secured to the post. So let's do that. Now, depending on where you live, there's a good chance your bat house is going to need to be stained a dark color. If you live in a real hot climate, then it'll probably need to just stay white, or even paint it white. Do a little research, find out exactly what works for your area, and go with that. In my case, I live in North Georgia, and I need mine to be about a brown color. So I'm going to try traditional cherry on just some scrap wood while this is drying, and see just how well that turns out. That might work, but it is kind of dark. And to clean up some of this glue residue, we're just going to take a chisel and carefully work at it. Now we're going to glue the top on. To do that, we're going to lay it on its back, put all the glue on, and then put this in place. And we have a sacrificial board down there at that end. We're going to carefully try and clamp this just securely in place, just like so. It is very important to remember after adding your stain or paint to double check your grooves in your landing pad to make sure you didn't accidentally fill them in. And if you did, scratch them again. Now that the stain has dried, we're going to be adding those bats that we made earlier. I'm probably going to put them at some kind of an angle like that so it looks almost like they're kind of flying, but easy to see from a distance. We're going to use some glue in the back and attach those. Now I hope you enjoyed this simple bat house. I only used 4 fence posts for this entire thing. Now when you're going to mount this, there are a number of rules you need to look out for. I wrote a bunch of these down so I wouldn't forget them. First off, you need to find a place that gets at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. The sunlight's needed to help keep the box warm and regulate the body heat of all the bats that might be inside so they can just sleep and have a good restful state. Next off, you need to mount this a minimum of 12 feet off the ground. Yes, that may seem high for some people, but you got to remember, as the bats fall out the bottom, they will fall, catch flight, and hopefully be able to clear whatever is below this. So make sure there are no obstacles or anything below it for at least 12 feet higher if you possibly can. Also, you need to keep this away from lights. Predators are attracted to light, and you want to have this in a place that do not have many predators. Also, I've seen a number of people put this up in trees. There are a few reasons you need to be careful with that. First off, predators will easily climb the trees, could get in there and could kill the bats. Next, you look out for the trees on the limbs can easily shade that area and prevent that 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight needed for the bats. It's also recommended that you put these on some type of a pole, an independent pole out in your yard away from anything else, just to kind of keep them safe. In many cases you can use a metal pole or a wooden pole. In my case, I have an old telephone pole that's out in my yard and I'm thinking about putting on there. There's also a place possibly on the back of my house that I could do that, but I gotta double check the 6 to 8 hours of sunlight time just to make sure that'll be appropriate. In any case, this is a simple bat house. I really hope you enjoyed this build. I hope you can get out in your shop and have fun building. Make sure I'm dead. No. Corner cover.